Yes, you are centered.
All right, cool. All right, let me do my quick intro. No, oh yeah. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for coming this evening to our March 3rd, 2022 Door County Maritime Museum Speaker Series. If you would, everybody, make sure your cell phones are silenced. Yeah, you too.
Yeah. My mom will be texting me.
For those of you that are online, please mute yourself. We will be muting your video if you haven't done it already, just for our bandwidth purposes for our video. And want to thank Door County Medical Center for sponsoring the series this year. And with that, I present to you tonight Ms. Tamara Thomsen, here to talk about shipwrecks.
That I haven't been in a room with this many people in a really long time. So I'm intimidated to start out with. So, and I don't even want to know how many people are online. So, but thank you for coming out tonight. So I am a maritime archaeologist with Wisconsin Historical Society. I've been working there for a little bit over 18 years now. So I'm new. But yeah, there's quite a few people who have long legacies with our program. I am one of two maritime archaeologists for the state. So the other one is named Caitlin Zant, and you'll see a lot of images of her because I tend to be the one in behind the camera, so I'm taking a lot of pictures of her, and so you'll see her in a lot of these slides that we'll see next, maybe.
Tell us when you're ready.
Okay, next slide. So part of my job really is to, you have to look no further than the state seal to understand how important maritime legacy is to our state. We see the sailor and the anchor, but one of the things that people don't see often is the caulking mallet, that the arm and hammer that was put on there on our state seal as a to indicate prowess in industry, but that is a tool specific to the maritime trade. So that's pretty cool that it is so important that it ended up on our seal. Next slide, please. Okay. We'll get this together. We will. So you might, a lot of people find this really interesting too, is that, so when my office, the office that I work in was started in 1987, and my predecessors went through and did a lot of historical research, mining of the literature to kind of figure out what we had as far as shipwrecks and historic losses in our state. And they came up with a number, and it's a moving target. So I check it almost every time that I do this presentation. But there's 727 ships that were lost in Wisconsin waters, which may be more than you would imagine. But of those, also this is a moving target number because we've got a lot of guys that actually do shipwreck hunting as a hobby. So they'll go out with a fish finder or slightly better technology and a little bit of research and go looking for shipwrecks. And so we have new discoveries that are made every year. And I'm going to end up with interpretive dance. I just know.
No, you're fine. We're good.
So and so we are up to 194 that have been located. So there's a big discrepancy in those numbers there. So if you'd like to take up shipwreck hunting, there's a good probability that that you make it lucky still. Okay. So these guys are seeing the zoom on top.
We're trying to get everybody in.
If you can go back one slide. So we have, although a lot of our one more, so a lot of our shipwrecks, I'm just going to put random slides up. I'll just talk. No, it's all fun. So a lot of our shipwrecks people think about shipwrecks being in deep water and that divers can only be the ones that access these. But in fact, we have an awful lot of shipwrecks, especially in the Door County area, that are up on shore, and some of them are even up on the beaches. And so you can see here a very shallow shipwreck. This is the Schooner Iris. which is off of Washington Island, right where the where the ferry, you can take the ferry across to Rock Island. And for a number of years recently, there in low water levels, this was high and dry and out of the water. We're just going to keep moving through. A lot of these are accessible also by kayak. So again, we have those are in the recreational diving range. So we have divers that, you know, they're beginning divers will dive shallow, like 10 feet or so. We have those that are inshore bound from there, which can be seen by kayak. And we have those that are very deep, which we'll use robotics to look at. So tonight I wanted to concentrate on some of the shallow water shipwrecks. How many in the audience here are divers? Okay, we got a couple divers. Okay, 3, 4, got 4, keep going. No, but how many people kayak or enjoy boating? So quite a number more. So I'm going to concentrate a little bit on those. And you know, I think especially like even in the exhibit, when you go to see it next door here, that a lot of those really celebrate the diving range shipwrecks, but we don't give these ones near shore as much credit as they need. I think you got to go forward like 2 or maybe 3 slides. So one more, there you go. So we are marking a lot of these shipwrecks. We try to make them accessible in that we'll put out buoys. Not all of them receive buoys, so there's sort of this system in place for us to evaluate which ones we would like to put marker buoys on, and then there's a permitting process that goes into marking them where we work with DNR. But we're also working with DNR to make them accessible to everyone virtually. And we're doing this through the Wisconsin State Water Trail. And I'll talk about this a little later. It's a GIS website that gives all the GPS locations of all the shallow water shipwrecks throughout the state. So it should be pretty easy then to go and find them and enjoy them yourselves. Next slide. We're moving right along. Okay, so I'm going to start out by talking about some of the archaeological work we look at. So a lot of times when you're looking at these shipwrecks that are in shallow water, they may come across initially just as a pile of boards on the bottom, but our job really is to interpret them and to sort of put them back together to understand, you know, how the wreck happened, how it fell apart, how it was constructed, and to get that information. Because in a lot of cases, there aren't blueprints and there aren't ship plans that still exist for a lot of these vessels that were made, you know, in ship lofts. The designs were thought out there, and then also, you know, the job of being a shipwright was really, you know, apprentice born. So you studied under someone else, you developed your own technology. It was more of a rule of thumb in making them, especially early on. All right, next slide. So the Australasia is located here. This is just south of Cave Point off of Whitefish Dunes State Park. This shipwreck, we were notified about this in 2005. It's going to surprise you. It was discovered by jet skiers. So there were guys out on jet skis. They were cruising around in the bay. One of the guys saw sort of a dark object on the bottom, and he happened to have a mask under the seat of his jet ski. And he jumped in the water with a snorkel, looked down, and there was a shipwreck. And he thought, well, that's interesting. So he scooted up to the beach and walked up to the visitor center that's at Whitefish Dunes, and he asked the naturalist there, hey, can you tell me about the shipwreck that's off your beach? And she says, there are 13 shipwrecks that are lost in the bay. And since it goes on and on, she's like, no, I want to know about the shipwreck that's off the beach. Yes, there are 13 shipwrecks that are lost in the bay. And she was, no, so I finally got to this point where he communicated to her that there was actually a shipwreck there that was exposed from the sand, and he wanted to know about it. And it was unknown for us. It was probably known to others, but it had not been reported and had not been reported for the state. That's pretty interesting. So we went out almost right away when this thing was found. Next slide. And we discovered, we took a tape and we ran it the length of the wreckage that was on the bottom, and we went back to that historical database that my predecessors had put together, and we determined that it was most likely the Australasia. So the Australasia was built in 1884 in West Bay City, Michigan, by James Davidson. So James Davidson was a master shipbuilder. He actually had a competitor, the Wheeler Yard, which was right across the bay from him. They could watch each other building these ships, and they had this competition to build the longest wooden bulks carrier. And so at the time when Australasia was built, it was 282 feet long, and it was the world's longest wooden ship of its time. So they were kind of increasing this edge of technology for wooden shipbuilding as they were watching each other and competing. Next slide. So we look at what James Davidson done. This is James Davidson's photograph with him. And really, you know, when a lot of his competitors were switching over to steel, he was continuing with wooden vessels. He purchased large tracts of lumberland. He stockpiled this lumber. And so when everybody started running out and they were having to retool and start over to steel, he was still going with wood. And so for a fraction of the price, he could make these large wooden vessels and steamers, and then he would make consorts, so these tow barges to tow behind them and carry comparable amounts of product to market. So he could compete with the steel shipbuilding. Next slide. He employed about 100 men for each ship that he constructed. This, I think, is the Chieftain, one of his later vessels that he was building. Next slide. And you can see in some of the pictures that we do have of his yard, he constructed almost three vessels at a time. So it was really this sort of mass production that was going on of ships. Okay, so let's talk about traditional shipbuilding for these cargo carrying schooners and steamers. We would have, for a very basic ship, small, you would have a keel with a floor laid down on top of it, and then a keelson. This would provide your structural support. But as you got longer, your ships got longer, and they started carrying more cargo, you needed more support down that central line of the ship. And so they would start stacking other timbers down the center. So here we see on either side of the keelson, you have sister keelsons. And then on top of it, you would add a rider. As it gets even longer, they start adding and piling more of this longitudinal lumber down members down the center here. So we have the keelson and then the sister keelsons, and then on top of those sister rider keelsons. And a keelson is going to be like the backbone of the ship down the center. So a great big timber, very thick, that goes down the central line of the ship. Okay, and so we see here, even when we get more longer and bigger ships, we need that strengthening down the central line. And so we have the keelson with sisters and sister riders and first riders. If you go outbound of this, even you have three breasts. You're looking at, they're calling them cousins. So there's a lot of space that's taken up in the cargo hold of your ship, just reinforcing that that line down the center, the longitudinal support of the ship. Okay, next slide. So Davidson rethought this, and you're going to think, wow, this looks more like a modern cargo ship. Well, yeah, this is the birthplace of it right here. Okay, so what he did in order to provide that strength down the center of the ship is that he reinforced, he's a single keelson here, click next, just click it. And then he sandwiches this on either side with iron plating, next, click it again. And then he had 6 floor keelsons to be able to provide that longitudinal support. So you see, you can put a lot of cargo in the center here, and you still have the same support that you would have by piling those all down the center line. Okay, next slide. So we look to the shipwrecks. Yep. Is there any chance we could I can find it? Okay, so we'll work on that. How's that? So we look to the shipwreck and things on the bottom to be able to look for these features. And so here we have the central line of the ship. You can see that we have the stanchions here in the center, which are creating the support, but it's this huge, massive centralized keelson and riders and everything that are down the center. So that's pretty consistent with now it's like flickering, yeah. So pretty consistent with Davidson. Next slide. So this is, again, we don't have a whole lot of blueprints, but one exists. And this is the Thomas Cranage. So a ship that was built later on by Davidson. So remember, Australasia was pretty early, but we can kind of see some of these features that are started in Australasia and are continued on as the evolution of design. He actually designed more than 100 ships at his yard. So you can look at like just the shipwrecks lost on the bottom and see sort of his evolution of design throughout his career. Next slide, or next slide, okay. And so we see here, in order to provide further longitudinal strength, he's adding arches into his construction. So we see them highlighted here, and click again. And we see them on the bottom. So these are hogging arches. So it's preventing hogging from misloading and sagging of the vessel. Next slide. The other thing that he adds, click it again, is the basket weave strapping here. So this is, so you see that it's throughout the vessel. And this prevents working in the waves of the vessel for being so long. Next. And we see that this is peened through each one of the frames. Next. And we see this on the bottom as well. So you see the basket weave structure continued here. These are 5 inches wide and about a ½ an inch thick. And this vessel burned. So the story behind Australasia is that on the 17th of October, 1896, it was coming across the lake. It made it across at Bailey's Harbor, and about that time, it was 10:30 in the evening. They had just put their dinner on. They had a turkey in the oven, and they had fought their way across the lake, and they were getting into the lee, and they were going to have dinner. And as they turned to come south along the shoreline, it was noticed that they had a fire burning beneath their decks, and the lifesavers from Bailey's Harbor took after them in pursuit. So they're rowing their boat behind them. So they tried to put the fire out, sort of a half-hearted effort was made, and they ended up grounding the vessel just outside of the Jacksonport area. Eventually a tug was sent from Sturgeon Bay. They abandoned ship. They took their small boats and rowed to shore, and the farmers met them and gave them libation, and a big party broke out on the beach, as well as some fights. Eventually a tug was sent from Sturgeon Bay and took the ship in tow and made it around Cave Point before the line parted, and they decided to give up on the whole thing and abandon it. So you can see a lot of the burning that's happened also here in the shipwreck evidence on the bottom. Next slide. And so we see all the peening too. Again, remember, you're peening through all of those cross braces, and so we'll see a lot of the rivets. Next slide. That continue on. It's like a field of fasteners on the bottom, and all of the wood has burned away. So it's massive. It's like 2 football fields full of this on the bottom. Next slide. And you can see just the extent of the fire. There's huge like globular pieces of melted metal on the bottom too, which are still associated with the shipwreck. This is brass. I can't remember what the melting. At one point in my life, I knew what the melting point of brass was. Next slide. It's a really popular site to go see, and we have put a buoy out on this one. So every time that I've been out to visit this, there's been shipwreck tours, kayak tours, people coming around and looking at it. It's pretty shallow, especially when it's in calm water. You can see quite a bit of it. Next slide. And so we went out and surveyed this. You can see that there's a lot of sand in the center. Okay, so the whole ship is there. It's under that sand, and we watch for the sand to move in and out throughout the year. So we go back and check this. This is kind of one of those sites that we monitor, so that if it does become more exposed, well, then we fill in a little bit more of the puzzle so that we understand what's there. but a huge section of the stern is exposed, and the bow is always there, and comes to about I think 5 or 6 feet from the surface. So it's pretty impressive. Next slide. Okay, next one I want to move a little bit further south down the beach and talk about the scow schooner Success. The Success is like, you know, we were just up here. Now we're moving down to here. And so this is just south of the boundary of Whitefish Dune State Park. There's a couple cottages that are there, and it's right out in front of those, and right in the surf zone. So we got a call that said, hey, there's a shipwreck that's becoming exposed on our beach, and so we were able to come out and take a look at it. And the story behind this one, you hit the next slide. It is the schooner Success. It is a scow schooner. So scow schooners are kind of interesting little beasts. They were square, so they were didn't really take a whole lot of shipwright skills to build a scow schooner. There was this adage: if you can build a barn, you can build a scow. And so it was really this entry point for a lot of people into the maritime trades. So this particular ship is 103 feet long, so pretty small. But we see a lot of people, you know, immigrating with maybe a little bit of knowledge of sailing or working ships. It was a way for them to really start earning money right away for their families as they got here. Mostly Norwegian immigrants, actually. So you see here kind of the square bit here. You might want to think the square end is the stern. That's actually bow. And we have this set up as a survey. So we've got a baseline down the center, and then we have it divided into 10-foot sections, which we draw to scale. Next slide. So this is what we drew. So again, you have the bow here, the square end, and quite a bit of it is exposed when we surveyed this. You see that there's a bilge pump and a capstan, and so some of the equipment from the ship is still associated with it. There's only 8 feet of water. Right? So it's like right up on the beach. So I've gone back there, by the way, it's not always exposed. So it's this gift that when you get to see it, you should really enjoy it, because the last 2 years, the only thing that we've been able to see is just the very top of the centerboard trunk. So that sand moves in at least 7 feet. And then eventually we'll move out. Next slide. So the story behind the loss of this ship is it was loading lumber at Whitefish Bay in 1893, and got caught in a storm and was pushed up on the beach. That anchor's drag was pushed up. They were able to recover it, and they sailed it for 3 more years. And then it was loading lumber at Whitefish Bay, and it was 2 days before Thanksgiving, and a big storm blew up in 1896, and same thing happened. They dragged their anchors, and it went up on the beach. And this time they fought all night with the pump, and the sailors were worn out, and all of a sudden it just caught them and dragged them right up there, and the pump broke as they wrecked. So here's the pump, and which is pretty neat. This is the double action bilge pump here. And you can see my coworker Caitlin surveying that. Next slide. And if you look very closely at it, it says Badger. It's from the Badger Iron Works in Milwaukee. The designer of the pump is B.W. Feldhausen of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I think it's pretty cool that this artifact that's so associated with the sinking of the ship is still there, and it's in 8 feet of water. It's crazy. So I also love that it says Badger. Next slide. The other thing that's on it is the capstan. There's a great big capstan, like 4 feet, or sorry, not 4 feet. It's 4 feet. Yeah, it's like it's right there. You see that it says Union Power, and it was painted red. There's remnants of red paint that are on that. So which is also pretty crazy. So, but yeah, so it's kind of neat that it's so shallow and has all that stuff on it. Okay, so a lot of times too, it's not just about shipwrecks. I mean, we have more individually listed shipwrecks on the National Register of Historic Places than any other state. But a lot of times too, it's It's not these individual shipwrecks, but the combination of shipwrecks and the site that they represent. And so we were able to list most of the Bay of Jacksonport as an archaeological complex. So it's sort of this, there's a series of 3 piers, there's 4 shipwrecks, and click, I think this is a video. So we fly, whoa. And so we're gonna fly to Jacksonport here, and then if you see that there's like a white line in the water, that's not really there. That's actually the line of the archaeological district. So quite a bit of that is sort of protected area because of its contribution to the lumber industry. So, and that includes, again, 3 piers. The furthest north pier was the earliest pier, called the Hibberts Pier, built in 1868. And then the southernmost pier is the Reynolds Pier, which is built in 1869. And then the central pier was the Lanier Pier, which was mostly used for fishing. That was built in 1880. Next slide. So over about a 10-year period on and off, we were here surveying the pier, and this is like so small, but you can go to our website and I'll give you that information. You can zoom in and actually see what this is. But so just kind of give you an idea, Reynolds Pier is here. There's 2 shipwrecks associated with it. That's the southernmost boundary. You can see a lot of these shipwrecks. There's wreckage that is washed out and becomes exposed from time to time. That's right off of Lakeside Park. This is County Highway V that goes out to the end. That's now a boat ramp. So you can launch your kayak there, go right out and see it. And then north of this is this massive pier complex of the Lanier Pier. And then if you look, this little worm thing in this here, that's actually a pond net boat. So a real early fishing boat that comes and goes out of the beach there, right in front of the Square Rigger Motel. And then going north from that, the first constructed pier was the Hibberts Pier. It was very lightly built, so it's just it doesn't have the cribbing and the fill. It's just the posts that are going out, and then north of that is a shipwreck, which we later determined to be the Annie Doll. I'm going to ruin the story for you, but it's the Annie Doll. Okay, next slide. So this is what Jacksonport looked like back in the day, right? So they had, it doesn't look like this at all, right? I mean, the store's still there, but they had large amounts of wood that were banked on the beach. They would spend all winter cutting this wood and bringing it, stacking it there, waiting for the opening of navigation. And then ships would come to the piers, and they would trade. Next slide. This is what those piers look like today. So you can see they're just inches from the surface of the water. So you don't want to take a motorboat in there, or if you do, you want to know what you're doing, because you can tear out your lower unit pretty fast. You guys are laughing, so I'm wondering if you did. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So danger. Yeah. I think this kind of looks like pier henge, like these stacked posts. But it is kind of fun to snorkel or to take a kayak or stand up paddleboard through there, because there's a lot of stuff. Sometimes in the lower water levels, the tops of these pier pilings are exposed, and you'll see birds and stuff sitting on them. Next. That was the Reynolds Pier. And then this is a shipwreck piece, like a side hull piece, which was exposed. I think 10 years after we did the survey, we get a call that more. So there's more stuff to be discovered. The maps always speak up. My job is never done. Yeah. So we would go out for baseline and then try to add it to the overall site plan. Get the next one. So this is either the Perry Hannah or the Cecilia. We know both of them were wrecked at Reynolds Pier, the southernmost pier. We don't know which one is which is a little bit crazy. You're like, how do you not know? But they're pretty close in size. So one was 125 feet long, the other one was 118. Don't ask me which was which. But both the remnants of both of the shipwrecks are there, so you can see pieces of both of them. And we're hoping as more is exposed, we'll be able to determine which one is which. But for now, we're kind of leaving that ambiguous. That was the centerboard. That would have gone down through that centerboard trunk. Have a big dagger that prevents the ship from slipping sideways in the wind. So it keeps it on course. So these are the zoomed in. Remember, I told you couldn't see this. Well, here now you can. So this is the Parahannah and Cecilia. One wreck here, but we don't know which one's which. But quite a bit of wreckage there. And then this is really bad. I don't know what's going on, but this is we called it the Jacksonport North Shipwreck. So this is the one that was all the way north of the Hibbard's Pier site. And we didn't know what it was supposed to be. There were a number of vessels that were lost in this vicinity that were roughly the same length. This is the story. Everyone wants to pin the name on the shipwreck, and it was really hard for us. So the story of this is that we surveyed this in 2008, and we had a number of people from WUA, Wisconsin Underwater Archaeology Association. It's sort of a group of divers that wants to learn archaeological skills, and they help us with our projects. And we also had people from Great Lakes Shipwreck Preservation Society, and they're out of Minneapolis area. They came to join us to help us survey this. So we surveyed the whole wreck site, and we just called it the Jacksonport North site because it could have been one of about 6 vessels. And we had an intern that was working with us for this summer from New Zealand, cute kid named Matt Carter. And everyone thought it was really funny to take, because he comes from New Zealand, right? Everyone thought it was funny to swim out, and because we were swimming from shore to the shipwreck site, and throw coins at him. He's like down there concentrating and working and trying to get everything right. And then they would swim over the top of it and throw a coin, and this coin would float through the water. And I don't know, I guess if you're an underwater archaeologist from New Zealand or Australia, you think if you see something flipping and flicking in the water, that's probably a shark and it's going to eat you, right? So he would just jump out of his skin, and so everyone thought this was the funniest thing. So for a week long, there's now, I don't know, buckets of change on the bottom. So when we pick up a site, when we're done, we count all of the rulers and pencils and slates and make sure we get everything back. And so I went out and collected most of that, and then I spent another dive picking up as much change as I could find. And so if you see, this is the centerboard, and behind the centerboard there is mast step. So mast step is a hole that the mast would have been put into. And the tradition in shipbuilding of this early era was that when you were going to finish your ship and step your mast, you would take a coin from that year and throw it into the main step, and then put the mast up. It was supposed to be good luck. And I thought this was sort of an adage, and I'd never seen one of these, and and I thought, well, that was kind of that we'll never see one. But I was picking up all this change, and so my dad also collects coins, right? So so I was putting them into a bag, and I noticed one of them was older. I couldn't see what date it was on there. I just knew that it wasn't a dime, like I knew a dime to be. And I thought, well, maybe he doesn't have that in his collection. He probably does, but at least he'll think I'm thinking of it. So I throw it in the collection bag. And we had a volunteer that was working for us named Russell Lights, and Russell is a very anal guy, and he keeps the tally of what stuff has been taken out in the field and what stuff comes back. And he was a science teacher, so you didn't find that extra pencil. You had to go back and look for it. Anyway, so I said to him, hey, when you're going through that change, one of them was a little bit older coin, and I'd like to grab that for my dad. So he's going through it. He's like, oh, that's really old. And we started looking at it, and it's actually an 1848 seated Liberty dime. And so that allowed us to pin the name on the shipwreck, because the Annie Doll wasn't known as the Annie Doll all along. In fact, it was originally built and named the Mary, and Marielle, and that one was built in 1848, and so that allowed us to narrow it down to what ship it actually was. So that's pretty cool. That was And that was believe it or not, in all of my years up until this last year, that was the only artifact that I've ever brought up from a shipwreck. So we leave everything in place because these sites are, they're tourist attraction. We get people to come from all over the world to dive our shipwrecks. And the more stuff that's down there, the cooler it is, and the more people come. And so, we do archaeology by collecting information and data, not by removing the cool stuff from the shipwrecks. So anyway, that was I had to get a permit for taking that, and we had to do conservation on it, and it created a big mess. But that was that allowed us at least to put a name to that shipwreck. So this is the mast step that I took the coin from. Next slide. And you see that centerboard trunk is only like, a foot or two under the surface. So don't hit it with your boat. And this is what the Mary Doll would have looked like. This is just floating lumber here at Milwaukee. So you can see she's what's called a Grand Haven rig. So you're like, okay, well, you just said she had 3 masts. She did have 3 masts at one time. That central mast was removed, and so they could put more lumber on their deck. So I don't know how this thing sank. It didn't have the mast in it when it sank, and it still kept its coin. Okay, might be my last one. This is the Hanover, so I want to talk about this one. This ship was built in Irving, New York in 1852. And it was, you may have heard of, if you've been out to Chambers Island, this big strip of sandbar that comes off the south east corner there. It's called Hanover Shoal. And because that's where the Hanover was supposed to have been wrecked. And so in 1867, it was in early November. It was sailing from Chicago to pick up lumber at Oconto. And this area here with the Strawberry Islands and Chambers Island here was largely uncharted. And so they got hung up on what they said the Strawberry Islands was the report. And the ship went to pieces, and they had to abandon it. So that's all we really knew from the newspaper accounts, except that a few years later, old Peninsula Days, the book, I'm sure you guys are all local and have maybe come across that or looked for it if you haven't. It's kind of interesting. They tell this story about a guy named, he was a notorious strongman named Alan Bradley. And he went out to the wreck of the Hanover, had a 1,000-pound anchor. He single-handedly recovered the anchor into his small fishing dory and then took it back to Fish Creek. And so this is sort of this fable that goes along with it. So we know that the Hanover is probably somewhere in that area, but we didn't know where. And it wasn't reported to us, and we didn't know. Okay, next slide. So a guy comes out of Sturgeon Bay here. It's like, I don't know, he's got a brand new big yacht, and with a autopilot cruise thing on it, and he sets that up, and he runs it up on a sandbar, not on Hanover Shoal, but there's a little sandbar that's just south of the Strawberry Islands, right? And so he calls conservation warden, and this is Mike Neal in the foreground here, and he has a little ROV, like a robot, and he puts it in the water. And he goes to look to see if there's going to be like some sort of, I don't know, disaster happening, like all the fuel is leaking out of this boat or whatever, to make sure there's not going to be an ecological nightmare. And instead, he finds that this big yacht is hung up on a shipwreck. And he says, I know something you don't know. And so he says, you found a shipwreck. Next slide. So this is the video that he said. I think it's going to take a click to get it to play. So this is the sonar. So this is sound wave imagery, which is going from the ROV. ROV is remotely operated vehicle. Okay, so, and you can see here, this is sound waves, which are penetrating through the water. They're hitting a hard surface, which is the bow of a ship. And so he continues to sort of pan side to side and make sure you can see the stanchions down the center, and you can also see the frames on the sides. And so, with this, you can also take measurements if you want to, but it's only in 10 feet of water. So why not go dive it or snorkel it anyway? So we actually did. So he's going to finish running down the length of the ship. You see the centerboard trunk is still standing. And what's kind of crazy about this ship is that the sandbar had covered it up until the year that the ship went on top of it, because there are no zebra mussels or quagga mussels now that were, from almost the floor of the ship all the way up the sides. It was pretty fresh. So there was very little of it that had been exposed before that sandbar. So this crazy amount of sand that's moving around here. You want to move the cursor forward just a little bit, like maybe halfway, because he's got a, on that, just got to slide it. There you go. Move it half. Keep going. There you go. Click there. And so this is again from his ROV. So it's kind of interesting. You can see, the depth of water and the temperature and what degrees his heading is. So you get all kinds of information on that. But you can see how that just this upper bit here has got the zebra mussels on it, but the whole floor of the ship is free. So that had sand on top of it. Until very, very recent, but it takes about a year for those zebra mussels quagga mussels to colonize this. So it's kind of crazy that just the tops of everything were exposed until the ship, the vessel came to land on it. All right, next slide. So this is what the Hanover looks like. So you can see that there's the whole ship's there. So we have the all the way from the stern post all the way to the stem post, and centerboard trunk and everything is right there. So it's kind of cool. You can accidentally stumble across it. In fact, I was at a kayaking convention that they had up in Raleigh's Bay, and I was talking to a couple people, and they reported in their shipwreck to us that they had just been kayaking over as part of the convention. So we ended up on Washington Island looking for that. So you never know. I got to get you all out looking for them, because then that'll help us find more and learn more. Next slide. So the way to find our out about shipwrecks and known shipwrecks, a couple different things. We run a website along with the University of Wisconsin Sea Grant Institute, which is called wisconsinshipwrecks.org. And I have bookmarks in the back so you can remember that. But if you go there, all 727 shipwrecks are here, and a little bit of information, some more than others if we've actually completed the full exhaustive historical research. There's also attractions, so the maritime museums and lighthouses and all of that information is within the attractions, and GPS locations, so you can find that stuff. And then learn is pretty interesting. So every time that we go out and we'll do a full survey of a shipwreck, we also do an exhaustive history on those, and then we write up a site analysis, so a full description of what's there. And all of that is done. Our yearly field reports are put in there, and so you can learn as much as we did anyway about various shipwrecks that may interest you. There's also some things for kids that are in there too. So if you have kids or grandkids that you want to share this with, and then we also do what's called Maritime Geocaching. We've got 11 of them that are here in Door County. So in case you want to just stay on land and not really get wet, you can learn about some of the maritime history, and it's kind of place-based and takes you around. So that information is on there too. And if you want to talk to me or find me, you don't even have to grab my card or know my name. Just quickly contact us, and that comes to me and Caitlin. One of us will answer you. Okay, so I was talking earlier about this Wisconsin State Water Trail that we're partnering with DNR on. So this is this GIS-based mapping system, and so next one, you have to load it, and then what you can do is you can pull up what area, highlight the area of the map that you want to look at, and it'll tell you sort of, it's really for kayakers, or paddle boarders, and tells you where you can put in, where you can take out, places you can camp. But we've added all of the shallow water shipwrecks to this site as well. So if you had a cell phone and you're out, make sure you're putting it on your neck or something so it's not floating in water, and a waterproof case. But you could load this, and then you could follow this to take you to some of those sites. And then what we've done is we've added background information. So if you are like over a shipwreck site and you want to learn more about it, it will add that information to a data field that will give you information on the shipwreck that you're visiting. It'll also link to wisconsinshipwrecks.org if you want really a lot more information. So that's kind of neat thing. I won't even give you the URL because it's like crazy long and doesn't really make sense to me. Just Google Lake Michigan State Water Trail. By the way, there is a Lake Superior State Water Trail as well, in case you find yourself up in the Apostle Islands or something. So, and that's all I have for you tonight. Thank you for coming. Does anybody have any questions? I do have gifts, party gifts for you, for all of you that came. I have posters. This is the Senator, which is the Door County Shipwreck. So in case you need some bathroom art or garage art. And then we also have bookmarks, and I have some business cards, and you're welcome to take as many of those as you would like, or give them away as gifts. That's fine.
You've been trying to get rid of these for a while.
What?
I saw these this summer, I think.
Well, I
did for one.
No, this was last year's state archaeology poster. So this year it's the canoe. So the 1,200-year-old canoe.
Oh, does somebody else have to find?
Somebody, yeah. Okay, so what questions do you guys have? Yes, ma'am.
How often does somebody report a new shipwreck that's not a new shipwreck?
A new shipwreck that's not a new
They
shipwreck.
think it's new, they're very excited, and you're like, what's it? We know you're excited. That one's been done and dusted.
No, not very often. So a lot of times we try to make as much information available. So a lot of times it'll be a lot more than anything. It's a new piece of an old shipwreck that's discovered, and that's kind of interesting. So not very often. We've had also there's a lot of guys. I'm not saying that shipwreck hunters are shady, because they are not. But there's a lot of guys that might keep that information for themselves and not share it. So then we don't have it in our database. And then someone will say, hey, I found a new shipwreck. And then they'll report it to the newspaper. The newspaper will ask us, do you have it in their database? We don't have it in our database. They'll then print a story. And then the shipwreck hunter from the 1980s comes out and says, well, I found that in 83. And you may or may not be able to match that up. So I don't know. So I think, so now more than anything, a lot of these guys are letting us know that they found it. They might give us like sort of real base information, and then that way we can, stop the feud before it starts. Yeah.
Give us like a really short description of how you
I can never do short.
how you survey these things.
I
Okay.
can't even imagine how you write anything down or.
Okay,
record it
so
on a
yeah, so we
computer.
write on sheets of Mylar, so like write in the rain paper. Have you heard of that? So it's like a plasticized paper, and we use a pencil. And and then you just kind of there's two different ways depends on how deep the shipwreck is as to how we will take notes. So one way is if it's shallow and it's manageable to survey, we'll lay a baseline down the center of the ship, and then we'll divide the ship into 10-foot sections, and then you do what you learn to do in kindergarten. You draw what you see, and then you add measurements to it so that you can scale it. And then we'll also, some guys will actually draw to scale underwater. So I can't see well enough to do that. So my vision is really bad. So I kind of just draw what I see and put the measurements on it. But they count like the little squares and the blocks, and they'll actually draw to scale underwater, which it's a great skill. I don't have it. And then we take that information and we put it on a master site plan. So like I'll be assigned, 0 to 10, and you'd be assigned 10 to 20, and you would be assigned 20 to 30, and so on all around. And so we would put those then side by side, and that's how we get the survey together. So yeah. So then the other way that we do it is my coworker and I have kind of developed this plan where we put the baseline down the center of the ship, and then we each draw a side, and we're able to do like stuff in like 25 feet of water, 30, it's a little, might be able to do it, but when you get to the 40s and 50s, we can't stay underwater long enough to be able to handle it, but we can do a whole shipwreck in about 4.5 hours. So that one of the site plan that I showed of the Hanover, that was done in 4.5 hours. So just with the two of us. So it's a lot easier if you have help. But and then we use different kinds of technology too. So we use instead of just using scuba tanks, we'll use rebreathers. They're like circulating devices. And so as you metabolize out the oxygen, it injects oxygen back in to your breathing gas. And that allows us to stay down that 4.5 hours underwater. Plus the byproduct of that scrubbing system to scrub out carbon dioxide is heat, so it's warm. So because hypothermia is a problem too. So that's kind of how we do it. For the real deep stuff, we're doing survey with robotics, so ROVs, and then we're also doing photogrammetry, which is stitching together photos of the ship to create a model. And if you have scales that are associated with that, you can actually take measurements from that. So we just completed one of the Ariel Hackley, a scaled model, because I don't know, like Green Bay is like, what's green? And it's like, you might be able to see from me to you, but I won't be able to see the whole shipwreck. I don't think anybody's ever seen the whole shipwreck before. So it's kind of neat to be able to put together an entire model made out of photos of the ship. So, yes, sir. So I said that was not short.
Shipwrecks, does that include shipwrecks in inland waters also?
Commercial vessels is how we limited it. So there's a couple of them that are on the Mississippi River. And there's a couple of them that are in Lake Geneva, but otherwise most of them are Great Lakes. So yeah, there's like, when you talk about like vernacular craft, like stuff that's like been made for, locally and to be used locally as sort of sport craft, that's a whole nother beast. There's two of us. So we're like Lake Mendota. Let's talk about this. So my backyard. And there's a guy, name is Rick Krieger. He's known as Radio Rick. He was the guy that did the 911 compliance for radios, police and fire, and everybody could talk to each other on the radios. So he's a small electronics guy, retired. And he bought himself a side scan sonar, and he divided the chain of lakes in Madison into a grid. And then he's systematically gone out and hit every one of those grids. So he has, what is he up to? 73 abandoned vessels of like various ages. Some of them are very early. They're like excursion vessels. You could get on in Madison, go across the lake, and they used to have picnics at different points on the lake, and you could do it. A couple of those are abandoned in there. So I mean, that's a whole nother monster that and then that's just Madison. So there's like Racine had its own built own shipbuilder there, and a special kind of craft. And you look up in northern Wisconsin, there were shipbuilders that were there too, that were making these boats for people. And
about 5 years ago, I attended a lecture at the White Dunes State Park Nature Center.
Yeah.
And there was 3 young ladies from the State University, and I believe it was in South Carolina.
East Carolina University. Yeah, they were here for a field school that we were hosting. We do a lot of that too. We host either field schools for recreational divers that want to learn how to help us do our job. And then we also will host field schools for university students. So that was one. They're from East Carolina University. It's in Greenville, North Carolina. And they have a program in maritime studies there. So in fact, most of the people that are working in the federal system come out of the East Carolina program. So there's a couple other programs that are around, but they tend to take all the federal jobs.
We were studying, mapping 3 shipwrecks. I wanted to look across the bridge here.
Oh yeah, so they were looking at the Adriatic. Yeah. So that was more than 3 years, 5 years ago. That was 8 years ago, but time flies. So
This lady right here started questioning.
I'm ignoring you. Yeah, you had a question?
Yeah, I heard part of a deal on TV the other day. There's some kind of organization that they can do on the lake, for the lakes now. And they're gonna do it in Michigan, but it's going to be on the Wisconsin shoreline.
Oh, you're talking
Yeah,
about the
that's it.
National Marine Sanctuary. Yeah, so for the last 15 years, we've proposed and been working through organizing a National Marine Sanctuary for Wisconsin. And there is one in Michigan. There's one that's in Thunder Bay already, and that's been around for almost 20 years. And then one was designated last August for Wisconsin, and it includes from about Port Washington area, like just south of Port Washington, all the way up to almost to Kewanee, not to Kewanee, but south of Kewanee. And it includes, just did the numbers, yes, 27 shipwrecks, which have been listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It includes the 2 oldest known shipwrecks in Wisconsin. And there's 3 of the shipwrecks that are in there that still have the mast still standing on them, that are on the bottom. So that's why that area was designated, because it kind of tells Wisconsin's maritime history, or at least the maritime history of Lake Michigan, through the shipwrecks that are within that bounded area.
Yeah.
That helpful? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any more? Yeah.
And now I remember more.
Okay. It's called the Wisconsin Shipwreck Coast National Marine Sanctuary, and it started last year. We've been working on it since 2007.
You don't want to extend that up to this area?
You know, so like, okay, so I also was involved with the proposal. And the first thing that we did was we received a grant to look at areas of shipwreck, congregated areas of shipwrecks. Okay, so Door County, of course, was cleaved off right away and looked at as a whole. And the shipwrecks in Door County, most of them, as you probably know, are very shallow, and a lot of them are on the beach. Some of them that are in Death Store Passage are just obliterated. So they don't have, although there are more shipwrecks here in Door County and in the county waters here, they don't have the structural integrity of the ones that are in that region. Those are whole shipwrecks that look like ships that are still on the bottom. These are interpretive piles of ships. Yeah. So yeah, that's mean, but I mean, there's not any less value to them, I think, historically and also archaeologically, but they're not intact, preserved shipwrecks. Also, in that area, a lot of the ships are very deep. And so because those shipwrecks are deep, a lot of the artifacts are still associated with them. So you can, look at some of these, like the Senator. The Senator was a car carrier. It was carrying Nash automobiles, taking them to market. So it went down 1929, 2 days after the stock market crash. And so it has this rolling stock of Nash automobiles that are still tied down inside the hull, the 2 levels of the ship on the bottom. So I mean, it's crazy as far as the difference in preservation. So.
It's still mining.
All right, hold on. Right, somebody else got a question. Yeah, I know this.
She's cutting you off.
It'll keep going all night. Who else has got a question? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell us a little bit about the canoe?
Oh, sure. So I had a Saturday off, and what do you do when an underwater archaeologist has a Saturday off? Go diving. So I grabbed one of the girls from the dive shop. Her name's Mallory Draw, and she's 24. And I had these things called diver propulsion vehicles. So these are big fans with a battery, and they tow you through the water real fast. It's a lot of fun. And we went in Lake Mendota. So again, right behind my house there. And we were scootering along a wall. And there's a lot of fish that hang out on the wall. So we were chasing fish and picking up trash and stuff for an hour. And where she stopped, what her turnaround point was, she stopped at right over the exposed end of a dugout canoe. So I got out my notebook, because I have a Write in the Rain notebook in my pocket, and I wrote, hey, I think that's a dugout canoe. And she was like, yeah, but I got to turn around. So she was down to half of her gas or air supply. And so she wanted to go back to the boat. So we scooted back down the wall. And I made a note of how deep we were and how long it took us to scooter back to the boat. And I thought I could find this again, because it's on a wall, right? So you can follow the natural contour and navigate to it. And I said, hey, I really think that was a dugout canoe. It could have been a log. And because, well, dugout canoe is a log, but I'm like, I could be mistaken. I said, but I really want to go back and fan it off and see if it is. And I said, can we go grab another tank? It's a beautiful day. And she said her boyfriend he plays pro basketball in the European leagues, and he was home for the summer. She wanted to go to his basketball game, so she couldn't go. So I grabbed a girl that I work with. So her name is Amy Roseborough, and she's an archaeologist at the State Historical Society, but she's a terrestrial archaeologist, and she specializes in the mound builder population. So I said, I think I found a dugout canoe. What are you doing? She's like, I'm trying to catch up on work. I'm sitting in front of a computer. I'm like, it's so nice out. Now you want to go sit on a boat? So she came with me, and then I found it. I went by myself and I found it again. And we moved the boat. We got a coordinate. And I said, hey, Amy, and I brought a camera. And I said, I'm going to take some pictures of this. And do you want to see? Because it's neat digital that way, right? So I went down, took some shiz and dives, so I took pictures of it, brought it back up, and she's like, yeah, it looks like a dugout canoe. I'm going to fan it some more and see how much of it is there, because maybe it's just the end or something. So I kept fanning and fanned and fanned and fanned. It was a whole darn thing. It's 15 foot long, and it's buried, on the slope. And she said, well, do you see any artifacts, anything weird associated with it? And I'm like, well, there's just, no, not really, but there's this weird pile of rocks. She's like, well, bring me up the rocks. So I grabbed all the rocks and I swam them up to the boat, and I showed her, and she took pictures of them, and she said, now take the rocks back down. So I went back down. She said, you know what those are? Those are net sinkers. That there was a net inside this boat. So this is the oldest intact dugout canoe, which has been found in Wisconsin, and it's the only one that's been found with associated artifacts. This net sinkers. So there's they look like rocks, right? I couldn't, yeah. So, but they have like little notched edges on them, and that would have received the corners of the net. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go cover it back up. So move all the sediment back over the top of it. And she went in on Monday and she reported it. And that's her job too. She's the database manager. So that helped. That took some load of my work off. And so she recorded it, and we let people know, and nothing happened. And so nobody said they wanted to recover it. We asked, we weren't getting any responses. So we just dropped it. We figured it's going to be out there. So, and we got a new state archaeologist in either late July or early August, named Dr. Jim Skibo. So, and she's in the same work group as me too. So we, sitting down with Jim, and everybody's talked about the dugout canoe, because that's all we're talking about. What do you think of this dugout canoe? We show him pictures of it. It's like, he says it's too nice to be an old canoe. He said, have you taken a sample of it? And like for radiocarbon dating. I said, well, no one will give us a budget line for this. They can't just have something radiocarbon dated and spend a couple $100. So he's like, well, we'll come up with a budget line. So he said, go get a piece of wood. So we got a piece of wood, and then we started, because it's work. We started placing bets. And because why not, right? And so I bet on 1950s Boy Scout canoe. I was very wrong. So it turned out to be 800 AD. So yeah, it's 1,200-year-old. It was crazy, mind blowing, No, it's been brought up. It was brought up in November. And it's at the State Archive and Preservation Facility in Madison. It's undergoing conservation. So, but we do not have a conservator, so and we're independent conservator. So we hired someone to write a plan out for us, and so now we're working on that. It's going to be brought up in 2 weeks. We're going to bring it out of its tank. It's been sitting in a tank of fresh water with a biodetergent in there to try to kill all of the. We have zebra mussels in our lake, and so we didn't want them to grow in this tank. And there's other worms and other weird stuff. So we've been trying to kill that off with UV lights and this biodeterrent. And then we're gonna bring it up, change the water, and then we're gonna start using a process called PEG, polyethylene glycol. And so what that will do is it's a bulking agent, and it replaces water that's in waterlogged cells. And then we'll allow the artifact to be stable, so we can touch it and work with it and that type of thing. So that'll take about 3 years. Yeah. So
It'll take 3 years to soak it in the PEG stuff.
for it to take up all the water, and then so it's about 2.5 years for PEG, and then about 6 months with a dehydrator or freeze dryer. So which will dehydrate any remaining water left out of it. So.
We're interested here at the Maritime Museum because we have a wooden canoe downstairs, and so we are trying to thank you too. We're trying to figure out and plan for the next steps of preservation.
Yeah, we're working on it.
We got them aged.
How large is
It's 15 feet long and about 1.5 feet wide, and it stands 7 inches off the bottom. So yeah, it's thick everywhere except for one area where there was a knot, and the knot fell through. And so we actually are trying to put the story together of the canoes. You know, canoes were cached, right? So when the season stopped, the hunting grounds moved on and so on, they would take their canoe and they would put them under water and then put rocks and cover them up with mud and whatever to protect them. So we figured, well, that's probably what happened to this one, but it's in 27 feet of water. So no one's going to cache their canoe in 27 feet of water. So we started looking at it, and it does have this knot, which has popped out. And so it's likely, and it didn't overturn because it still has the net sinkers in it. We think that somebody was, paddling their canoe and stepped in the wrong place and pushed the knot through, and started filling up with water and sank. So hopefully they were able to make it to shore. So yeah, the net sinkers came up when we did the canoe recovery project in November. Yes. Okay, so there's a permitting process. So anything that's on state bottomlands that has historic context to it, and you want to bring it up, you need to fill out a permit for, it's a state lands archaeology permit. And if you can demonstrate, sorry, like getting really dry, but if you can demonstrate a need for bringing it up, and you can demonstrate how you're going to preserve it and how it's going to be, kept in perpetuity, then that will be permitted. So there's been a few things that have received, you say, oh, you got a permit and we'll never get anything. Well, it's not designed to stop people. It's designed to make you think through the process and be able to, understand what's going to happen. It's not just bringing it up. There's it has to forever. What's going to happen to this artifact forever? So you want to make sure that it's in the best interest of the artifact, and also, it's public property. So it's not mine. It's not the state's. It's all of ours as citizens of the state, and what we do with it to protect it.
So what's to stop it from just bringing it up and going away with it?
Well, most people, I'm sure some of that happens.
Because I was going to say, when you go back and look at all the wreckage, you know what they look like, obviously, because you've been down there
Right.
many times. Do you notice the things that are missing that are?
Okay, so let's take the Frank O'Connor, for instance. Okay, so the Frank O'Connor is a really popular shipwreck with a lot of artifacts on it. It's just off of Cana Island, and it's buoyed. People come and see it, and what we found, and everybody was, I think, in the 90s was very very, very nervous about all the artifacts that were there. It's a huge discussion. What to do? Should we bring them up? Should we let them be there? Whatever. And I'm sure some things went missing, some of the smaller things, but some of the more popular things are still there. What's really helping us is, believe it or not, like YouTube and social media and things like that. Everybody wants to have their picture taken with the big wrench. They get on the bottom with the big wrench, they take their picture, and then what the problem is that people move it around, right? So they hide it because they still don't want the wrench to go missing. And so like what's happened with the big wrench is that, it's like it gets reported almost every year that it's missing. It's not, it's just hidden under some timber somewhere else. But so there's the things going missing, there's things that happen like every once in a while, but it's more rare than you would think. Sort of that ethos has changed over time, whereas it was, finders keepers and sort of a prowess for divers. If you didn't come up with something, you were no good at what you were doing, right? To the Abandoned Shipwreck Act passing in 1987, that protection coming to the shipwreck sites. And then we had this whole time in the early 90s where there were still these people that were, from the old days that were still removing things, and there were a lot of lawsuits that took place and artifacts that were recovered. Now we get to this era, and we see a lot of those guys from the 80s, 70s, and 80s that had basements full of cool things moving into nursing homes, and their kids are just not as interested in this basement full of junk. And so our problem now is that all the maritime museums are saturated with these really cool objects.
Nobody knows where they came from.
But yeah, exactly. You lose some of that information associated with it. Some guys were really good in keeping track of where they got the stuff from, when they got it. I mean, and that information still remains with it, but we don't want to see that stuff going to the dump. Anyway, there's so much of this stuff out there that divers these days they kind of see, at least the divers in this area see that. East Coast divers, I don't know about, but yeah, so here they're seeing that, man, I don't like seeing what's happening with all these guys that we put up on a pedestal and had all this stuff, and what's happening to all their stuff. It's this huge problem. And so, yeah, so is it possible? Yes, to bring the thing up. Could he get away with it? Maybe, but he's probably going to end up, putting it on, if it's somewhere, putting it on his boat, coming into shore. When you're coming to shore with a great big anchor on your boat, people are going to look and take pictures. I couldn't even sit in the parking lot with people coming up looking at me, so like, it's kind of unlikely. Yeah, unless he's coming in under, the veil of night and there's nobody else there or something, but still there's video cameras at all these docks. Someone's going to catch you. Sorry. But, and then, and like what the conservation warden says, do what you can afford, right? So you want to try, man, like there's fines associated with this. Pardon?
What is the fine?
I don't know off the top of my head. So, and there's also depends on what he charges you with too. So it could be archaeology without a permit. What is it? Theft of state property. Did you get this thing, whatever it is, from a known burial site? So, or there even remains associated with it. You just desecrated the site. I'm saying, so there's different levels of this stuff. So
Trying to look up fine.
I'm not the shipwreck police.
Well,
I work with them, but yeah. So he is the shipwreck police. So there you go.
The bigger ships, the full intact ships. Have you dove, dived?
Dived, yeah, or dove, your choice.
Yes, have you?
Yeah, I have. I took that picture back there. That's the Lakeland. So that's in 200 feet of water off Sturgeon Bay Canal. I've owned 7 different rebreathers. I am a KISS rebreather fan. So the reason, and I have a couple different models of that, is because I believe in manual rebreathers, because I don't want the electronics controlling my life support. I am a control freak. And so, you know, it's a steeper learning curve, but I feel very comfortable and confident that I have to interact with my life support. I have to, or I'm gonna die. So I can't just put it on autopilot and go diving. So.
One more question we got time for. Who's got the last one?
Drum roll.
Who
No
has
one's
the
gonna
coin?
take it. Pardon?
Who has the coin now?
It's at the State Archive and Preservation Facility. So that's the one thing, yeah.
You get all the good stuff.
You can probably borrow it.
Oh, this is true.
There are loan agreements.
This is true.
Oh, she said last question. Go ahead.
I have, so, I mean, basically you want shipwrecks reported to you, but where is your cutoff? You know, is it like if you happen to find a 40-foot wooden vessel frame somewhere?
Yeah.
You know, is that something to report?
Yeah, anything historic, pier sites, or you know, parts of vessels, vessel cargoes that have been jettisoned. We put it all into a GIS database. It's important to understand where that stuff is, because let's say there's dredging or something else that goes on and something gets covered. We need to know, you know, where the dredge spoil is going and if there's anything there that will, you know, be covered up and we won't know about them afterwards. So yeah, we want to know about everything. Give it to us. We can, you know, we can take if you can get the coordinates for us, we'd love to have it. So what do you know? Come on, what do you know about? Give it up. Yeah.
Well, I'm on the water 200 days a year,
Okay.
and obviously during my free time as well, I'm on the water. But yeah, there's there's a lot of small boat wrecks out there that I would say are from the 1900s.
And they could be pond net boats, and that's something that we want to understand. So if they were used, you know, like early fishing pond, you know, impoundments, they're putting those up. They're called pond net boats. They're set the nets and pull the nets, I guess. So we're interested in that, yes. So if you know where that stuff is, people are driving on ice, lost cars and vehicles. That too, yeah. So we've gotten 3 slays reported this last year. So by conservation wardens, yeah. So in various parts of the state. So yeah, anything.
Thank you everybody for coming. We will see you